Good evening. I'd like to call the October 17, 2024 Lincoln Way 210 Board of Education meeting to order. Please stand if you're able for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ms. Davis, can you call the roll?
Dana Berthold.
Here.
Katherine Johnson.
Here.
Joseph Kostic.
Here.
Richard Lacine. Caitlin Olenek.
Here.
Deidre Stokes.
Here.
Aaron Janik.
Here. All right, we have no public comment this evening. First up is the presentation portion of the agenda, our 5-year financial forecast.
Thank you, sir. Good evening, everybody. Sorry. Financial forecast looks forward over the next 5 years. I will display the presentation. I do have some additional supporting information in your packet materials tonight. By modeling our budgets multiple years out, we can better anticipate our financial risks, look for opportunities that might help us financially. As this board knows, we worked very hard to get where we are, and so we really have to keep a healthy foundation now. We need to make sure we have the right resources, but what this modeling exercise does is we need to make sure we have the right resources at the right times in the years that we need them. There are years where we need larger budget lines. That might be for textbooks, for curriculum resources, just based on subject area cycles. Might be other years to budget extra money to update technology. We have our bus bid went out today, for example. We might decide to purchase buses instead of leasing them. That might be more fiscally responsible long term, but in a given year we need more money up front. So those are the things that we factor into this, and by forecasting it out we can plan appropriately. When mapping out our budgets for the next 5 years, we take a look at each budget area in detail. What you see on the slide right now are our operating revenues that you approved in the fiscal year 25 budget last month. We use this as a starting point, and then we forecast, as you can see toward the top, growth in our local property tax revenue, changes to CPPRT. Just as an example, CPPRT this year's $900,000. Historically, what I do is I take a look at 10, 15-year, 20-year norms. We're more in the 600,000 range. During COVID, the state got a bunch of money in terms of COVID, post-pandemic, and so these state allocations went up. A couple years ago, we were actually at $2 million. It came down to 1.3. It came down to 9. Next year, I've forecasted it back at 6 because I've been informed we'll see another reduction. And so those are the types of things that are really important to know about. We can handle the ups and downs, but we have to factor them in. So we do look at a granular level. Evidence-based funding also, we've seen fair and reasonable increases because we have been identified by the state as a Tier 1 district, meaning that we have, they've identified us in terms of what we can fund locally as needing more state support. So we have been now for a couple of years on the cusp of Tier 1 and Tier 2. As we move into Tier 2 at some point and become a little bit better funded, there's a hold harmless. We're not going to lose money in this area, but that will flatten out, and it will flatten out very quickly. So those are assumptions that we do build in. We do the same mapping our expenditures. We've taken a look at staffing projections. As I think Dr. Murphy might have mentioned last month, you know we have many retirements coming up and hires to make. We take a look at enrollment and master scheduling, class enrollments, department needs, insurance. After personnel, we look at each area of expenses. That's services, supplies, capital. We also look at dues and fees, tuition. That might be District 843 tuition, private facility tuition. Those are not insignificant costs, right? And so changes in those areas can really affect our year over year. The other uses line at the bottom, just so you know, that $4.5 million, that is the capital projects funding for the summer, is what other uses is. So I want to take a minute and talk about CPI. Many of the predictions in this forecast are affected in some way by inflation. That's on the revenue side and the expense side. Property taxes, as you know, for existing properties, we are only eligible to get a CPI increase on our existing properties. I'll talk a little bit about new construction later. Services, contractual services, repairs, supply costs, those usually also follow a CPI related trend. In recent years, we have seen some costs outpacing inflation, sometimes substantially. I know we've seen that in our personal lives as well. I did do some homework through Bureau of Labor Statistics. Did want to cite one report they published, June of 2023 through June of 2024. So that 12-month period, we're seeing CPI come down. 2023, it was 3.4%. So far through 24, we're at about 2.5%. But certain items are way past that. So the price of eggs up 10.2%, beef 10, sporting event admission up 15.1%, motor vehicle insurance up 19.5%. And so these were just examples that they were giving, and we do the same granular look here. Our utilities, electricity, natural gas, follow a different CPI plus assumption. And when I say CPI plus, it might be a CPI plus 2, CPI plus 3. So we do look at a granular level there in terms of what percentages and dollars we assume for the next 5 years. Our largest source of revenue also required a lot of attention in this area. I went back and I looked at previous financial forecasts from past years. Overall EAV, taxable property value, usually changed about 4% a year. That does not mean 4% revenue. That means 4% property value change. That goes into a pretty complicated formula that the county uses to give us our revenue. But for me to estimate those revenues, I have to have the right assumptions built in. In recent years, and I think we can all do this if we go on Zillow, go on a Redfin app, you know home prices have been up significantly more than 4% a year. So they've been around 8 or 9%. We'd also seen some new construction amounts increasing for several years. If I took that bottom graph of new construction and I went back further in time, we've had 6, 7, 8 years of consistent increases up to 2022. We were at $81 million in new construction in 2022. Last year it dropped to $61 million. I get preliminary data from the county in September. It's at $48 million so far this year. And the reason that that matters, I mean, it usually goes up $3, $4, $5 million by the close of the year, and that's fine. But just for context, using our current tax rate, the difference in revenue for a year with $53 million in new construction versus $81 million is about $465,000. And why that's important is then that's going to compound every year they're out, right? So at the end of a 5-year look, that can be a material difference. So we're very thorough. We aim to be as informed in our estimates as we can be.
Can I ask a question right there? For the new
Sure.
construction, is that both residential and commercial, correct?
That's everything. Yes,
Okay.
sir. Yep. So many of the predictions made in this forecast are affected by that, so I wanted to highlight those pieces. We have done granular analysis, and I could go through all of it. I am happy to do so or answer any questions you might have about a specific topic. But with those assumptions in place, we are predicting a balanced operating budget each of the next 5 years, and that's what you see on the left, revenues in green, expenses in orange. This on the graph on the right, you can see the operating surplus for each year. Sometimes it's bigger, sometimes it's smaller, just depends on the needs in that year. At the bottom of this slide, you can see that very bottom sentence. By fiscal year 2030, our operating fund balance is projected to increase $7 million. I would ask you to remember what's important is our fund balances are required to stay at a percentage of our expenditures per board policy. And so our costs are also increasing every year. And so to keep pace with that, our fund balances have to go up to keep us at or above that 33%. So that brings us to our projection summary. Question?
Yep. So the projection, that's the big increase between 25 and 26, that's because of the additional funds for capital projects? Is that between the 25 budgeted and the 26 projected?
in terms of why that surplus is larger.
Yeah.
Just the needs in that particular year.
Okay.
I'll go forward to this table here and what you
And
can
maybe you'll
see.
get there.
Yep.
Thanks.
So we're still benefiting in the front year from our tax levy is split over 2 different calendar years, and so we're still seeing a little bit higher from the previous tax levy that had a higher CPI attached to it. And so we're in a little bit better spot in fiscal year '26 than we are in '27 and '28 when we're projecting the CPI and new construction down. That's probably the primary driver for it, okay? So this projection summary kind of outlines the whole budget operating for the next 5 years. I know it is small up on the presentation if you'd like to look on your own devices. The green line across the top represents total operating revenue for the year. If you take a look at fiscal year '26, for example, that amount is $126,532,726, and so the percentage next to that, 4.1%. We're projecting a 4.1% increase over what we have budgeted in FY '25 revenue that you approved last month. Moving on down through the table, the blue line is the same for operating expenses. It's $121 million and change, also a 4.1% change from FY '25. And you can move to the right and track those percentages as you go. At a more granular level in FY '26, you'll see a negative for federal revenue. That's the run out of any ESSER monies received. In FY '28 and '29, for example, under supplies for expenses, you'll see a big uptick, 8-point-something%, and then a drop back down. That's for planned expansion for certain subject areas and a large budget for textbook purchases that year. So all those things are included. As we keep moving our way down, the dollar amounts listed in red are the pre-funding totals for capital projects each summer. You can see most of these are at $3.5 million. Our list of facility improvements is a long one, as you know, so this is a constraint for us right now. So this is an area for us to explore in terms of opportunities. Dr. Tingley, myself, Chuck, we've been working with DLA. We're working to prioritize those. We will bring further information to the board as we have it. Moving down further, the orange arrow on the left points to the final operating surplus each year. The average across the 5 years is about $1.3 million. And again, those surpluses are necessary, as I said, to keep us at or above that board policy minimum. If you look at the bright yellow arrow toward the bottom left, that row of the table displays the fund balances for each fiscal year. And so by the end of fiscal year 2030, we are projected to close that year at just over $46.5 million and be at 33.5% fund balance. This graph represents a couple of things. That green line across the top, I'm sure you've seen forecasts in the past where that might be going a different direction. And so it's good that it's not going down. It's also not a steep slope up, and that's okay. We're in a stable spot, we're okay, and that green line represents total operating fund balances. So you can see that $46.5 million out on the top right. The bar charts underneath are fund balances in each individual fund. And the work that went into this behind the scenes is that over the next 5 years, we predict needing the most resources allocated to the education fund and to the operations and maintenance fund. And so that's where you'll see those increases go up the most. Transportation, municipal retirement, that's our IMRF and Social Security fund, those have some planned moderate spend downs. I do feel we have sufficient reserves in those funds. This is something that is a 5-year look. The total operating dollars are the same here. And so as we look between funds, that's something I would reevaluate every year and then bring to the board as part of a recommendation for the annual budget. As I mentioned, I've included additional tables, graphs, supporting data in your packet materials. Please feel free to review it. As you can see here, in this modeling work, we will maintain our operating surpluses each year, maintain the balances where they need to be. Again, our primary constraint right now is that capital project funding. We will bring more information to the board as we investigate opportunities there. stable but tight, I think is the most important takeaway from this look. I feel good about where we are. We do have some tight years. We need to manage it and keep our eye on it. But we have stabilized. I feel good about that. Happy to take any questions that you guys might have.
Touch on the spend down a little bit with the IMRF and Social Security. I was going through this, first of all.
Joe, hit your mic.
Sorry about that. Can you just touch a little bit? First of all, thank you for this. This was outstanding and ridiculously accurate, as best we can tell anyway. Can you,
Thank you, sir.
just because when I was going through it, I just couldn't get a handle on the spend down on Social Security and IMRF a little bit?
Yeah.
Without taking too much time, of course.
Yeah, yep, no problem. So what we look at is, in board policy, obviously we have some flexibility in terms of funds, right? So from a cash flow standpoint, as you know, we still do interfund loans between certain funds. Overall, our cash balances have stabilized. I feel fine, right? We've met our fund balance target. We're maintaining it. In certain funds, at the end of each year, you'll see, okay, here's the fund balance for the IMRF fund, here's the fund balance for transportation, fund by fund, right? And you compare that to the spending for the year. We might have a little bit higher percentage in one fund, and in the education fund or O&M, mostly where those interfund loans are going to
I see.
is where those balances aren't as high. And so what I don't like to do is do anything too sudden, but through the tax levy process, if we can gradually allocate additional monies there and balance that out, that's the work I'm talking about. It's not an issue, it's not a
No, I
problem,
understand,
it's fine the way it is. It's just a target that I keep my eye on, so that way at some point I don't have to come and say, hey, would you approve an interfund loan?
I see. Okay. Thank you.
I guess on EBF, I mean, is there a timeline with how they move a school from tier 1 to tier 2? I'm just curious on that. I was just.
That's a great question. So it's relative to other school districts. And so in a particular year, you might look 2, 3, 4 years ago, and the cutoff between tier 1 and tier 2, you have that adequacy level. So say we're 72% funded, adequately funded, according to the state formula, and 74 was the cutoff that year. So you think, hey, we're close, right? The next year, we might be 75%. And their cutoff is 76.
Okay.
So it's a little bit of a moving target. It is difficult to know. We have been close to that. We've been close to it for 2 to 3 years now.
And then we
we're
would be
still in
held
tier 1.
harmless, right? Like you said, it would be.
It'll never go down.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. We're
Okay.
hold harmless. Those monies, it's not like that CPPRT example. It will not go down. But whereas if you look at a year-over-year revenue increase, tier 2 districts, especially tier 3 and 4, it's flat. So.
So you can't rely on that for future. Yeah, got you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Awesome.
For CPI, in 26 through 29, you used 2.15%.
I did.
Why did you use 2.15?
Great question. I try to be very thorough in my research. I go to BLS, I go to many different banks, I consult PMA, and what I do is I sort of aggregate. I mean, you might, any of us could like Google Morningstar, for example. You know, you look at these predictive groups, but I take a breadth of 5, 6, 7 different credible sources that I trust, and I sort of look at that averaging. Some of them have, the first couple of years, us staying up closer to 2.4. Some had us in next year being at 1.9, which I don't foresee. But that's why I have 2.5 to close this year and then 2.15 out. That's the average.
And then what's the impact then if it is 1.9 or 2.4, if you are assuming 2.15, in terms of dollars, I guess?
Well, that's difficult to answer. It depends on what you're talking about, right? So if you're looking at the property tax, you know, our operating tax levy's 80-something million dollars, right? And in terms of existing property, if you look at a 0.5% different, we would receive that less in terms of existing properties. But on the expense side, I would be mirroring some assumptions in terms of supply cost and contract increases the same. Yep.
And then for new construction, you get that data from the county, you said?
I do.
What is their methodology for calculating new construction? Do you know? Is it permits pulled? Is it them talking to developers? Is it just,
So the new
you know, a
constru-
historical
Yep.
look back? 'Cause obviously, you know, we have a boundary. So once we get built up in certain areas, I mean, can't build up even more.
Right, so there are some districts that have almost $0 of new construction if they're completely built out, right? So new construction, what that is if we say $50 million, and again, that's not $50 million in revenue to us, that's, right? $50 million of new taxable property value being assessed on the tax rolls for the first time. That's what that is. So we only get CPI from, if all of us except Dr. Tingley have paid taxes before, all of our tax bills collectively, yours might go up more, yours might go up less, that's CPI.
And he does pay taxes, just so everyone knows. That's not some kind of deal he's got as superintendent.
Dr. Tingley built a new house, comes on the tax rolls, he's new construction this year, the taxable value
Sure.
from his property. And so what we look at is, okay, I look at that in the last couple of years, mortgage rates higher, home values higher, cost to build higher, so the new construction has slowed a little bit. That's kind of to be anticipated, frankly, just given the price of building materials and everything else. But if rates come down and building upticks again, we might see that tick back up. I don't want to underestimate things, I just also don't want to overestimate them, right? And so I'm kind of taking a look at the last 3-4 years averaging, and that's why I put it at 55 out. I'm hoping it's higher.
Right,
It's a conservative look.
Yeah.
I mean, historically, it's a conservative look. When things completely tanked, we were down in the 40s. But we had a meeting today, we already know there'll be some more commercial development. So I think that's a conservative look, which is the way to be on the projections.
Right,
Yep.
right. Any further questions?
No, these are a lot more fun than they were 10 years ago. without tax anticipation
I was going to say the
ones,
same
right?
thing, yeah. That
How much
line
can
was
we borrow
going
for how much and from
down.
who? Yeah.
Yep. All right. Thank you, Dr. Dubek.
Thank you, guys.
Outstanding, Mike, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the consent agenda. We have items D1 through D6. Can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions? Hearing none, can you please open the vote?
Voting is open. The vote is unanimous. Motion passes.
All right, next up, under action items, is the presentation of invoices for September 20th, 2024 through October 17th, 2024.
Motion to approve invoices in the amount of $3,492,694.38.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Do we have any questions about the bills, invoices? No. All right, hearing none, can you please open the vote?
Voting is open. The vote is unanimous. Motion passes.
Next up is the treasurer's report for September 2024.
In September, revenues totaled $48.2 million and expenditures totaled $9.9 million. All funds cash balance on September 30 was $85.4 million. Through September 30th, we have 37.3% of operating revenues received and 24.8% of spending has occurred. You can see at the same point last year, that was 37 and change and 24 and change. So both revenues and expenses really very tight, right in line with where we think they thought they would be. Investment report through September, liquid rates remained at 4.9 through 5.1, which is great. Those are starting to come down now. We are seeing the T-bills and the investment options to us come in with some lower rates, and so that's to be anticipated after the Feds had their rate cut. Cash flow report, cash variance positive $10 million. If you go back to my budget book detail last year, we were quite short on tax revenues. For whatever reason, in terms of their timing, it was off kind of significantly more than normal. That's caught up. We're all good through September. So we're right on. Looking ahead, November, December, we'll include the audit presentation next month, and you'll hear tax levy, and we'll have some various bids to bring to the board.
All right, can I get a motion to approve the treasurer's report as presented?
So moved.
Second.
All right, any questions on it? Knock on wood, things are progressing as they should be?
Yes, sir.
All right. Anything we need to be on the lookout for?
Nope. I think we had a good year, so like I said, you'll hear audit and more on that next month. Tax levy will be in line with this presentation tonight, so that the data I bring you will be in line with what was built into the 5cast.
All right, hearing no further questions, can you please open the vote?
Voting is open. The vote is unanimous. This motion passes.
All right, next up is the student activities report for September 2024.
For the month ended September 30th, 2024, the total student activity fund balance is $2,587,406 with revenues of $503,782 and expenditures of $397,595. Had one account in the negative, just $112 due to timing. It'll be positive by the end of October. And then we are requesting one new account, bring change to mind at West. Have an activity account at West to purchase supplies, included not limiting to mental health and awareness, kindness project supplies, and supplies to implement various projects related to mental health and creating a positive school culture. So we would ask to approve the student activity account as presented.
Can I get a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have bring change to mind at other schools?
It's a great question. We do.
I thought-
We do.
Thought it sounded familiar.
And once again, if you remember, since Kelly's been in this position, we took all of our student activity accounts and got rid of everything that wasn't being utilized. So now, still currently, all the accounts that we have in our records are one that are being utilized. If the clubs go away or there's expenditures stopped, then we'll remove those accounts. But she's done a really nice job of managing those and condensing. Yep.
Great. Any other questions? Nope, voting is open. Good job.
The vote is unanimous. Motion passes.
All right, next up is the appointment of new members to the District 210 Advisory Committee.
As this is a public body and in a committee of the board, we would need, each year, we need to approve those members that will be participating, so they're listed for your review. We would ask that you motion to approve the new members for 210 Advisory as presented.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Can you please open the vote?
Before Deidre changes her
Voting
mind.
is open. The vote is unanimous. This motion passes.
All right, next up under informational items is the report of the Lincoln Way Special Education District 843 Governing Board meeting held September 24th, 2024.
Yeah,
A lot of 24s
24.
in there.
Another great meeting. We had a update from the amazing work being done with the program that's at Mokina for our students with emotional difficulties. They're continuing to move students back into their general ed classes because they're making great progress in the program. So just a great celebration of what special education really should be is helping kids become more a part of their gen ed classes. They continue to keep up with any vacancies that are occurring after the school year started. So still looking to fill a couple of positions that were filled at the beginning of the year that are now vacant. So just some ongoing work, but generally great information.
Thank you, Dana. Then we have the utilization of e-learning days in lieu of emergency days.
Mr. Lasheen is not here to complain tonight. We will be submitting approval in November for the option to have e-learning days in lieu of emergency days. We'll kind of look at those case by case as we go through. We met with the union, and now we need to publish for 10 days and start the process. And so we'll report back in November and look for potential approval for e-learning days in lieu of emergency days.
So you mean no more snow days?
It would give us the option.
Right.
It would give us the option. And some schools have kind of gone away from these a little bit. We've had discussions administratively. We'll have the discussion next week at the board level. Lockport last year ran out of their emergency days. Five. And so we'll have those discussions. It does provide flexibility.
All right, no FOIA requests?
No FOIA requests this month.
All right, building and grounds report.
Building and grounds and community relations are in your backup materials. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer those.
I did have a question about the buildings and ground report for the electricity. It looks like it's up or down. I can't tell. East is,
Timing.
yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Very low, it seems.
So East is low. Obviously, we did not just use $2,500 worth of electricity at Lincoln Way East.
It's going to ask what kind of light bulbs we bought, because I could use those.
Very efficient. Chuck has done a great job. Chuck and I have had a lot of conversations, and work is going into this. ComEd has changed. I might have mentioned this in a different month. I can't recall if I mentioned this part. ComEd has changed their billing structure. Not only did they take away some of that credit and they're applying a carbon tax, but on top of all that, their billing is completely wonky. This is not a great answer, but we don't have a lot of leverage with a huge company like ComEd. But what we can do is we've worked with Mike Perry from Midwest Energy, who's our independent energy consultant. He helps with procurement, supply management, rate locks, and he's been advocating with Direct Energy, who's our retail supplier, from ComEd as the utility. And so their billing at some points is a month behind, but at some points has been 4. And we try to say, well, we're a school district and we have fiscal year budgets, and so that can throw things way off, as I've mentioned, electricity and budgets, in the past. And so it is not that Lincoln Way West, for example, is very high, it's that the others are low. One of the things I will say, and a point of reflection for me, is anything you see in red is usually an estimate, meaning we haven't, just timing of the board meeting, sometimes in the month, these come in mid-month. We use kind of those red and we carry forward an estimate from the preceding month, just as a placeholder. In this particular case, I'm not sure that's helping in terms of information, because if they're wrong to begin with, I don't want to carry it that way. That's something we'll take a look at. Yeah, but Aaron, we're just that far behind on bills. We do have, to reassure you, it built into the budget.
They are that far behind on billing. We're
Thank
not
you.
that, yeah.
We're not that far. Thank you. They are that far. And to reassure you, we have planned for 13 and for sometimes, for some of these buildings, 14 months of bills in our 12-month fiscal year budget. We have accounted for their delays.
Okay,
I just don't have the data to report.
okay.
It's the future of electricity, in the long run, like it's just going up, unfortunately.
That'd never go down.
I know. I mean, eventually, do we think about solar? I mean.
You kind of went, Mike?
It's something we can always look at. I know Chuck has done some research on it. We do have, regardless of the costs, from a budget standpoint, what I care most about is managing. We did build in, once again, into the 5cast, we worked with Mr. Perry and built in some assumptions I think are safe, and he's assured us in terms of Direct Energy that over the next few months they're going to get much more significantly caught up. What I will have my office do is try to put those costs into the months in which they belong, so you can see this report for its intent and purpose. Okay? Mm-hmm.
All right, community relations report is in our backup materials. We talked about drama in the student activities report. Are there 3 plays this weekend? I just want to make sure that's out there at all 3 schools, so please, everyone go support the arts. Joe, any of your kids in them?
Not this time.
Not this time? Okay. Usually there's a caustic in one of them, so. District 210 advisory?
So we met last week, and it was pretty exciting because the advisory committee has a project that we working with Dr. Fury in rebranding the district's logo. The district's logo, we know, is brown and beige, and so we are looking at rebranding it and incorporating the colors of all three schools and something that's representative of the schools. So we did some great exercises that was led by a company that has been retained to guide and lead us and to incorporate the different ideas. So I think it's going to be pretty exciting when we bring forward finally a logo that will represent all three schools and all three colors that are significant to the schools as well.
Yeah, that's been a long time in the making. It was, what, about 8 years ago? We talked about doing that, and we're like, well, let's maybe save the money.
High priority
Yeah.
at the time.
Right, not at that time.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's kind of cool.
right. Then next up is the budget calendar for fiscal year 2026.
Just once again, budget calendar is in your backup materials for review, just to give you a timeline of where we'll be going.
Anything on the legislative report?
Nothing to report at this time.
Superintendent's district report.
So I did include in the superintendent's district report the letter from DLA. So as you can kind of see the price points, if you go through and add all this up, it's going to be over that 3.5 million. If we're at the low price point on some of their price thresholds, we'll be close. So what we're going to do in the next month, different items that we're looking at the large parking lot at Lincoln Way East. We're looking at some work at Lincoln, or at the Transportation Center, to put concrete all the way out to Schoolhouse Road. Central High School, replace and restore roof A17. That's the entire field house, a very large roof. That'll be just shy of $1 million. Once we do that, Chuck, we're in pretty good shape on Central then. We're pretty caught up. This is our last major roof that needs to be addressed. Some general renovations. We would look to replace the existing home bleachers and press box at the Lincoln Way Central Football Stadium. We are not ADA compliant. There are no rails. There are no ramps. So we would look to do that. The outdoor track, most of it is original. We will do a supplemental bid on adding 8 lanes and see what that price point is. And then add bathrooms to the existing concession stand on the home side. It's the only school that doesn't have bathrooms on the home side. We have porta potties behind the bleachers. We think it's probably time to add some indoor restroom. The plumbing's already there. We'll just have to add on to the back. At the East High School, we would need to repaint the existing ceiling in the gymnastics gym. As you may recall, we did the entire field house gym 2 summers ago, Chuck? 2 summers ago. They'll sandblast, paint, look like brand new. They're experiencing the peeling and chipping that we did in the field house. At West, we would remove and replace the indoor track in the field house, just the track. The gym floors, the courts are doing fine. The track has not done well, and so we would look to replace that. And as I said, if you add it all together, we also have some fire panels, some striping, some seal coating. There are several other things that are going to go into this process, but we'll bring them back to the board for discussion in November and December. There are no mechanicals on here, so there's no urgency of timeliness of bidding. You know, aluminum's going to be the price of aluminum for the bleachers, and the track is going to be the price of the track. So roofing, we're in a good window to still get out to bid and see what that roof cost would be. Chuck, am I missing anything? Mike, anything else to add? So we'll work this up. Now, you'll see there's no HVAC on there. We've worked with DLA, and we have a plan through life safety for $30 to $36 million to update and enhance all the existing buildings. We're going to work through that process. We may be in a situation where we have to start using that $3.5 million per year. We may be able to utilize some bond monies, but we still need guidance and direction from the state of Illinois and State Board of Education, and we're working through that process now. In any case, in the next 10, 12 years, we'll need to get that done. That would include boilers at East and then changing some of our standalone HVAC systems into larger units. It's being developed and designed now, and then it'll put us in a really good place for about 30 years on our HVAC. And we've talked about each year now, we just need to do about $1 million in roofs and parking lots. So we're in a really good place there. So as we go through this process, we'll share updates and the plans, but this will be next step is to go out to bid, see where we fall, see what we can do next summer, have some discussions then and what we decide to do and what not to back at the board table here next month and the following.
So these are the projects that DLA has recommended we go out to bid on?
Not necessarily DLA recommended. In terms of the roofs, yes, they're the next up. They're still red, right? Last summer, we did some roofs here, we did some roofs at East and some larger. The two previous summers, we did the field house at East roof when we were doing the ceiling.
Right.
So it would make sense to be time to do this one. So they did. In terms of the track, we have to do something. We've patched it, as you recall, we
Right.
put $60,000 into it a
Yeah.
year ago just to get another year. It's at its end of useful life. It's been there a long time. The bleachers have been there longer than I've been here. They were there when Mr. Kostick was a student. So it's probably time to get those updated for handrails and such. And so, and the
So
other.
we'll be submitting these out to bid next month then?
No,
What's the timing on all this?
We're gonna go to bid.
Right.
Now.
Okay.
We don't have to do anything until the board approves it.
Right, right.
Yeah, so it's not in the past, we've done some formal requests to bid things. That was at a time where we were really, really tight and we had 1 million things to do.
Right.
We're in a pretty good place now. We have a plan for our HVAC. We were able to do some things for students this last year in the libraries.
Right.
So, if there are no concerns, we'll go ahead and go to bid and see where the price points fall. If we can afford everything, if the bid specs come in good, we'll come back and ask for approval for everything and say, let's go. Otherwise, we may say, okay, we've got to move this to next summer, we've got to move this to next summer. We can't afford all of it.
Right.
But these are the items I think it at least makes sense for us to get prices on and see where we're at. This puts us in a pretty good place. As I said, parking lots, this is a really large parking lot at East. It would be the west and the northwest of the building back by the tennis courts. That's our largest lot. And then East lot has been completely milled, overlaid, and redone in the past 4 years, 5 years. 4 years. So, as you guys remember, 8-10 years ago, we were really struggling. So East will be in a good place, and then we'll continue to seal coat, stripe, and maintain, so we won't get to the point we were where we had to mill down quite so far. Yeah.
Okay.
I just had a question about the west indoor track.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that's obviously not as old as maybe the central track? Like, is there anything that we've learned from the fact that one's
That's a
not
good
holding up?
question. It's a different track altogether.
Material.
So it's a different material. The one at Central, Chuck helped me, but it's sprayed on or basically painted on. It's a solid fixture. The one at West is rolled out and has more give and perforations. Is that a better way to put it? More perforations, and as the kids run on that, those perforations become ground up and basically disintegrate.
Okay.
Where the track we have resealed the track at East and Central a couple times probably, and that's the good old-fashioned spray down and it stays down. This, you have to peel it out and lay down a new one.
Okay, so is it
essentially.
gonna be a similar then to the other schools that's gonna
It
be
won't be
replaced?
there.
or
They
it won't
don't,
be-
they don't typically
do
do
that
the,
anymore?
no. So but it'll get us 15 years, 15,
Okay.
20 years.
Okay,
Yeah,
Alright.
it'll get us 15 years. This
Thank
one,
you.
the back stretch particularly just really got beat up where they do long jump, triple jump, and pole vault.
yeah, okay, thanks.
Good question.
All right.
That's all.
Any other district business?
None.
All right. No correspondence? No closed session?
None this evening.
No other business? With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned, and our next meeting is November 21st.